What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm half of the podcast, Kevin Valentin.
And on the other half of the podcast, my name is Kyle Darrow. Kevin, what's going on, man?
Good, man. I'm good. Been busy. Started a new job on Monday. Just been, working like crazy. But the sports world continues no matter what. Kyle's going to read off the agenda today since he's got it right in front of him. So, Kyle, I'm going to flip it right back to you. What do we have to talk about today?
So we got a couple topics for you guys. So the first one we'll go over will be the predictions for the Thursday matchups in the NBA playoffs. We've got Game 3 featuring the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. And then also we'll talk about Game 2 between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Utah Jazz. After that, we'll have a quick discussion about Nikola Jokic. He received the NBA's Most Valuable Player Award, so we'll dive into that for a little bit. We'll also talk a little bit about the upcoming NBA offseason a little bit, since some teams are already started in that. So we'll talk a little bit about Kemba possibly having a quote-unquote breakup between him and the Boston Celtics. We'll also talk about some rumors circulating about a potential supermax contract for Luka Doncic. Then we'll also talk a little bit about LeBron James. We'll talk about his interest in Space Jam 2 and whether or not that he appeared to be more interested in this upcoming movie than how the Lakers performed in the first round of their series between them and the Phoenix Suns. And then the last topic that we'll talk about today is the Knicks. The Knicks are already into discussions on possibly looking at some top flight free agents, and we'll talk whether or not that they should pursue some top flight free agents or continue to build around the young core that they currently have on the roster. But first things first, like I mentioned, we've got the predictions for the Thursday matchups. So we'll go over the Brooklyn Nets versus the Milwaukee Bucks. So this series currently is 2-0 in favor of Brooklyn. They've looked stellar in their first two home games. And Milwaukee has their backs up against the wall right now in Game 3, so they definitely got something to prove. So, Kevin, I'll ask you straight up, who do you have winning Game 3 between the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks?
So, Kyle and I actually talked about this prior to starting. It actually makes me laugh because I've picked Milwaukee to win both games. And I cannot even begin to understand what the hell is going on in Milwaukee, other than the Bucks are just being outplayed in almost every aspect. I mean, the Nets, even without James Harden from the very first minute of Game 1, have looked legitimately unguardable in almost every facet of the word. And the Bucks don't have an answer. I was watching a video. I can't remember if it was on Twitter or if it was on TikTok. It was a guy kind of voicing over some highlights of the series. And you saw that the Nets were doing what a lot of NBA teams do in regards to guarding Giannis, and that's giving him a lot of space and kind of stacking the paint and letting others beat him or beat them. But Giannis was taking mid-range jump shots. Giannis is doing terrible from the free throw line. Giannis isn't hitting shots from beyond the arc when left open. And I think it falls down to, ironically enough, the comments that James Harden made a couple of years back when he was regarded to saying, it must be nice to be 7 feet and just run down the court and dunk. That takes no skill. And I know that jarred a lot of different opinions and that ruffled a couple of feathers, mine included at the time, because I felt like he was just upset that Giannis was dominating the league as much as he was. But I feel like James' comments now have a little bit more fact behind it, because as you see, Giannis is kind of being exposed. Giannis does not seem like the type of player to go out and lead a team to victory. He did mow over the Miami Heat in the first round, and he looked absolutely incredible. But if we're being honest, now we're looking back at Brooklyn being up 2-0 in an embarrassing fashion. And then that makes you think, wow, like, is Miami that bad? Like, if Milwaukee destroyed Miami in almost every game, and now the Nets are dominating Milwaukee, you're like, well, damn, like Miami must have been just atrocious. No disrespect to them, but that's just kind of how it's looking. So to get back to my prediction, I've picked the Bucks 2 times in a row. I'm not going to do a third time as the charm. It just seems like the Nets are outplaying them in every facet of the sport. And I think Blake Griffin hoodwinked, bamboozled Detroit, because this man is playing absolute phenomenal basketball. I mean, the man is out here dunking on different people on a regular basis. Obviously, not to the electrifying quality or quantity of his LA Clipper days, but the man is still getting up there, getting there once, creating contact, and just being a pest offensively. And the Bucks don't seem to have an answer. So I'm going to confidently pick the Nets to win Game 3 and take a overwhelming lead in the Milwaukee series, or should I say, just in this series. Kyrie and KD have been playing at an exceptional clip, and the supporting cast is playing well around them as also. So I got the Nets winning by maybe about 5-6 points. I think the Bucks played better. They are at home. They do have a little bit more of an advantage, so to speak. But I just think Brooklyn offensively is just too dominant. And unless Giannis is going to be able to hit more efficiently from the field and the free throw line, I don't think this is going to be possible.
I'm going to go with the Nets here. And I'm really conflicted about this one simply because the Bucks have to do better than what they did in Game 2. They lost by damn near 40 points. And everybody on the roster had a bad game. The Nets just looked absolutely amazing in that Game 2 matchup. Kevin Durant was sensational. Kyrie Irving did his thing. They were able to get some good production from Bruce Brown Jr., Joe Harris, even Mike James stepped up and chipped in for 10 points. Just everything was going for Brooklyn in Game 2. And while I think that Milwaukee is going to come out guns blazing in Game 3, I just don't think they're going to be able to match the offensive output that Brooklyn's going to put on them. Just because no team has shown me up until right now that this team can be outscored with the players that they have on the roster. This is even without James Harden. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have done more than enough to get this team into the position that they are, and they are going above and beyond expectations that I currently had for this series. Because I thought the Bucks were going to be able to split one in Brooklyn, and that did not happen. They got absolutely washed in Game 2. So the way that I look at it, I think the Bucks are going to be a lot more competitive in this game. But I'm going to be honest with you. I still think Brooklyn wins this by 10 points. Just because they got to stop KD, or KD's got to have an off night. And I have yet to see that. I just think that KD is in one of those zones right now where nobody can touch him. You could, unless you double him, and he's got to kick it out to somebody in one of the role players, and maybe Bruce Brown Jr. or Joe Harris or like Mike James or Landry Shamet. I don't think it's going to happen for Milwaukee here. I really think that Brooklyn's going to go up 3-0 in this series. And to be quite honest with you, at that point, the series is over. If you're up 3-0 and the Nets have been playing the way that they're playing, I don't think Milwaukee's going to have a real shot in this series. And unless Giannis and Chris Middleton step up, because Chris Middleton has been absolutely abysmal in this series. He's averaging like 14 and a half, like 15 points a game. It's just not going to get it done. Giannis has played okay. He had a great first game in the series, but had a bad one in Game 2. To be honest, everybody had a bad game for the Bucks in Game 2. It's just, I got to see it to believe it, that somebody's going to beat the Nets. And I just don't think that the Bucks defense, who I thought was actually going to play very well against Brooklyn, is going to be enough to stop KD and Kyrie. And then Blake on top of it. I just don't see it. Yeah, Nets win this one by 10. I think it's like 110 or like 100. I just don't think that the Bucks are going to be able to score enough.
Yeah, and if they fall behind early enough too, they're going to try to play some catch-up basketball, and that might lead to some fast break points by the Nets, because if you're playing catch-up against this team, you're never going to catch up realistically.
I mean, to kind of even to dive a little bit deeper into the stats, I think Milwaukee only had 9 free throws in Game 2, and they made 4 of them. I mean,
atrocious.
That's like 44%. I mean, they shot 29% from the 3-point line. That's not getting it done. They shot 44% from the field, but Brooklyn shot 52% from the field. Brooklyn knocked half of their 3-pointers, and they shot 85% from the free throw line. I think the only way that the Bucks win this game is to get this game into a grimy, dirty style of play. They have to go after Brooklyn. They got to look to go to the foul line, and they got to knock down these shots, because I think the only way that Milwaukee's got a shot in this series is if they slow the pace of the game down. Because once Brooklyn gets going, it's like a runaway train. You're not going to be able to stop them. So I think they got to make this game grimy if you're Milwaukee here, because if they don't, if they play by Brooklyn's rules, Milwaukee has no shot whatsoever.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, when we flip it over to this next series being the Clippers at the Jazz, game one was a nail biter, came down to the wire. Utah ends up winning that game, like Kyle talked about in his episode today that came out this morning, or his segment. The Jazz won 112 to 109. Donovan Mitchell was stellar. The tandem tag team of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were subpar, at least up to their playoff expectations from the last series against Dallas. And they just had no answer in guarding Donovan Mitchell. So this next game two prediction, Kyle, I'm going to switch it over to you. What do the Clippers have to do better at other than guarding Mitchell to have a chance at winning game two?
They got to get some better production from their role players outside of Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard had a fantastic game. Was able to knock down a couple threes, but had 18 points overall. And I think you got to see Reggie Jackson step up a little bit. You got to see Marcus Morris step up a little bit. They were fantastic against Dallas in the first round of the playoffs. They stepped up when they needed to, when their backs were up against the wall. And if they get better production from those guys and get better performances from Kawhi and Paul George, specifically Paul George, because he had an abysmal game one. Paul George shot 4-17 from the field, which is not even 25%. And if you get maybe 35 or 40% from Paul George in that game, the Clippers win game one, even despite Donovan Mitchell dropping 45 on the Clippers' head. Like, that's going to be the main focus for me, just because I thought the Clippers had a very good shot to win game one and they let it slip. They just lost momentum in the second half because Donovan Mitchell just put it on him. I mean, he put his foot on the gas pedal and never let it off. So I think if you're looking at the Clippers here, they got to step up their defensive intensity a little bit. They got to get the ball out of Donovan Mitchell's hands, and they got to get it to somebody that, look, if you get it to maybe Joe Ingles or maybe Clarkson, even though Clarkson is the sixth man of the year, I would rather them beat the Clippers than Donovan Mitchell going off and scoring 45, damn near 50 points in game one like he did. So all in all, bless you.
Thank you, sir.
All in all, I think the Clippers just have to turn up the defensive intensity a little bit, have some better efficiency from Kawhi and Paul George, and I think they have a very good shot to win game two. And if you're looking at Utah, they got to get off to a better start because they were down 13 points at halftime. The Clippers really went on a pretty solid run to end the first half. So I think if you're Utah, you definitely got to get off to a better offensive output in the first half and just try to focus on getting the ball out of Kawhi's and Paul George's hands and allowing some role players for the Clippers to beat you, or at least take a chance to beat you. Because I'd rather have Reggie Jackson or Marcus Morris or Luke Kennard go off than Kawhi dropping 40. The Dallas Mavericks learned that the hard way in game 6 of their series. So, but this is going to be a fantastic series. I really do think that these teams are fairly evenly matched. I think this is going to be a fun series, though. I really do.
So who's your prediction?
My prediction for game 2 between the Clippers and the Jazz is I got the Clippers winning this one. I think, like I said, if they turn up the defensive intensity a little bit, they focus on Donovan Mitchell more. They may have to double him in certain defensive packages and allow some other guys, some other role players for Utah to have the chance of beating them. I'm talking about like Joe Ingles or Bogdanovich or maybe even Clarkson, just because the Clippers cannot allow Donovan Mitchell to drop another 35, 40 plus point game like he did in game 1. It's just not going to work. So I think if they do that and they get better efficiency from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, I think the Clippers get a very good shot of winning this game. And listen, if they are able to win this game, they split the series in Utah 1-1. You go back to LA with a chance to potentially go up 3-1 or 2-2. So the Clippers, this is a very good opportunity for them. And I thought that they had very, very good chances to win game one. They lost momentum in the second half, like I mentioned. I think if they're just able to maintain the momentum that they had in the first half of game one, I think they'll be fine in game two. But Utah's going to make adjustments as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see a better overall performance across the board from Utah's starters and role players than you did in game one, where it's just where you don't see Donovan Mitchell really kind of putting the team on his back and getting Utah a win. So it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be very similar to game one. I think the Clippers win this one. I think the Clippers win this one by like 5 or 6 points.
So I'm actually going to agree and say that the Clippers probably are going to win this one as well, but I'll keep mine brief since you stole all my damn thunder. I believe it's going to be a similar series like the Mavericks series. Now, I don't know if it's going to go 7, but it does remind me of pretty much what happened in our series. Luka was going off. They had no solution. When our role players played well, we won. When they did it, we lost because obviously everybody's focalizing on either the perimeter breakdown with Donovan Mitchell or Donovan Mitchell heating it up from the outside. I mean, if you really look at it, aside from the assist numbers, Donovan Mitchell and Luka Doncic are relatively the same in terms of player efficiency, just because Donovan Mitchell puts up a lot of volume of shots as well as Luka Doncic. And when he's hot from outside, he does tend to be a shooter, but when he's not, he drives it to the basket and then he gets his other teammates involved. Now, the difference is Donovan Mitchell can hit free throws. So I would say that the Clippers more than likely have a formula to win, and that is probably going to be, if it's going to be one person to beat us versus the entire team, we have to find a way to make sure that the other players aren't going to tee off. Donovan's going to get his looks. Donovan's going to get his shots. I don't think he's going to be as efficient at a clip of 45 a game, but I expect him to average anywhere from 30 to 35 points a game this series just because of the electrifying play he's had over the last couple of weeks, especially like rolling into the playoffs when he came back from that ankle injury. Donovan's going to get his looks, but it's like you said, it's a matter of will Bogdanovich be able to step up? Will Jordan Clarkson be able to continue his hot streak from the 6th Man of the Year award and so on and so forth? Will Rudy Gobert continue to be the Defensive Player of the Year? Congratulations to him. I believe this is his 3rd time winning it, or even the 4th. I don't recall exactly. So 3rd. But I do think the Clippers win this game. I do think Kawhi Leonard steps it up. I don't necessarily see somebody on this roster that can make him struggle or, give him a hard time. Paul George, I don't know if he's going to be pandemic P or playoff George. We did see that he had moments in the Dallas series where he did look like his old self. And then there were, quarters where he disappeared. It seemed like the entirety of this last game in terms of game one, he just went cold and he disappeared. So I have the Clippers winning another close one. Like I said, I think the series is going to be relatively close the entire way. And I think they find a way to steal one in Utah in game 2.
Yeah, if they steal one in Utah, that's a game changer, because I've always thought of basketball as a game of momentum, and
game of runs, boy.
It's like a pendulum. Right now it's kind of swinging in the direction of Utah because they had that nice come from behind win in game 1. But I saw some things from the Clippers that showed me that if they're just a little bit more efficient from the field, they can compete with this Utah team. I think this Utah team can be had. So, granted, Utah, they're the best team as far as the regular season went for this season, but I don't think that they're unstoppable. I think this team does have some flaws, and I think if the Clippers exploit them to the degree that I think that they can in game 2, that could be potentially significant for LA. And listen, you go back to LA 1-1, got the chance to go up 3-1. You take advantage of it. So as far as I'm concerned, the Clippers have a great opportunity here to tie it up 1-1, but so does Utah. Utah has a great opportunity to take this to 2-0. And listen, going up 2-0, going back on the road, it's a lot better than 1-1. So, you're going to see some fierce competition in game 2. That's for sure.
Stanton homered again.
Second one?
Yeah, that's what I said, right? It's kind of crazy. Our offense is actually doing something. We have 7 runs on the board. It's a miracle.
7?
Yeah, 7-1.
And Cole's pitching, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
Cole
God,
had a bad outing his last game. He got rocked his last game.
Well, at least they're giving him some freaking run support for once.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here, buddy. Kyle did mention this in the agenda. Nikola Jokic is your Kia MVP of this 2020-2021 season. Kudos to Nikola. He had an incredible and phenomenal year, both statistically and just like overall. Holy shit. I mean, he's the first center since Shaq to win this award. He's also the latest draft pick in NBA history to win the MVP. He was the 41st pick in the year he was drafted. And we've been saying it all year, man. Nikola's been playing at a clip that is almost unheard of, especially in his position. The man averaged almost over 26 points per game. He almost averaged a triple double. I believe, if I'm looking at his stats correctly, he averaged just shy of, yeah, like I said, just shy of 11 rebounds and then just shy of 9 assists per game. So again, kudos to Nikola for doing it at an incredible pace, helping the Nuggets go all the way to the 3rd seed. And he's a guy you can't sleep on. Kyle and I have been praising him relatively all year. And I know that I did predict Steph Curry to win the award. I wish he would have. He only got 5 votes out of all first place votes in the MVP race. But at the end of the day, it rightfully rightfully belonged to Nikola Jokic. So kudos to him, man.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'll never forget. I saw a video of this on Twitter this morning. Nikola Jokic went from the guy that was drafted on ESPN's ticker while they were having a Taco Bell commercial.
Taco Bell commercial.
Like, he has come a very long way since then. And it's well-deserved just because, listen, he's the first MVP to play all the games since Kobe did it in 2007, 2008 when he received his MVP. And the one thing that I just love about Jokic is that he is what I consider just the full package. The fact is he can facilitate like a point guard. He can shoot 3 balls just as well as an average 3-point shooter. And man, he has such a nice mid-range game, and he is a dominant force down low as an offensive presence. Just, I mean, the guy shot, if I have my stats right, he shot 56% from the field this year. He shot almost 40% behind the 3-point line and knocked down about 87% of his free throws as a center. That's amazing. I remember we put a video out a couple months ago where we were talking about Joel Embiid and Jokic were at the top of the MVP discussion, and we got taken to the wood shop by all these commenters on YouTube saying that Nikola Jokic was far and away the MVP at that point in time. And listen, they were right. He was sensational. I think he stepped up even bigger now that Jamal Murray's out of the lineup. So he's carrying more of the load. And Denver is still playing at a tremendous clip. And it's really all in part due to Nikola Jokic's just ability to play the game so well. And the fact that he has them competing in the second round of the playoffs. Mind you, when you lose Jamal Murray, you're losing a top flight point guard in this league. And despite that, the Nuggets are still rolling, and Jokic is the main reason behind it. So you got to give a lot of credit to him. The MVP is well-deserved. And it's easy for me to say, just, we're going to see a lot more from him, but I think he can take his game to another level within the next couple of seasons, because I think that this guy has a ceiling that could be, top 5 in the league.
And Duhar with a home run. The Yankees are piling on right now. Holy shit.
Very nice. Very
nice.
Nice.
That's what I'm saying. But that pushes us into our next topic. This particular instance, this player is not an MVP candidate, but this player at one point was regarded to a top free agent a few years back in the summer of 2019, and that is Kemba Walker, my boy from the Bronx. You feel me? Kemba, shout out to you, showing a lot of us that it could be done. So kudos, one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player in the league.
Cardiac Kemba.
That's my dog. But it seems that Kemba and the Celtics are looking to break up due to the inability of Kemba's consistency. He seems to be not only a defensive liability, but he's also a health liability. He cannot stay on the court. He has missed a significant amount of games both last season and this season. And it seems that, that him and the Celtics just aren't working out. I mean, when he came to Boston, it was with the intent that it was going to be the Kemba and Tatum show, or at least, Kemba, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown show. But it seems that he has fallen to maybe even a fourth option, depending on the night. So, Kyle, what I'm going to ask you is, first and foremost, it's a two-part question. Do you think that he has a chance of staying in Boston? And if so, Kemba Walker's contract is quite large. So this would mean it's an automatic trade. Who in the hell is willing to absorb the contract of a 30-year-old point guard who is a legitimate liability on the defensive end and who is nowhere near the prime in which he was back in Charlotte?
Well, first things first, I don't think he's going to stay in Boston. I think his days in Boston are over with. And one thing before I get to my second point, I hate the language that they're saying that this is a quote unquote breakup. Like, these are grown adults. Just say that they are basically looking to mutually part ways. That's a lot better than saying a quote unquote a breakup. Like, this is a freaking high school relationship coming to an end. Like, that's my little soapbox moment. It's just like, come on, like.
But you're right.
This is the
narration behind it is stupid.
It's just, when it comes to the freaking framing of these reports, like a breakup, no, they're making a business decision. And more than likely, they're going to mutually part ways, and that's it. Now, who do I think which team could pick him up? I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if the freaking Cavs go after him. I don't know why, but, it's just that the Cavs, just because that their general manager has kind of been inept the last couple of years, I could see some team like that going after him, even though that Kemba is a major defensive liability. Outside of that, I mean, he's not going back to freaking Charlotte. They're rolling with LaMelo, and I think they're probably doing that for the better. I'm just looking across the league. It's kind of tough for Kemba, just because he's a 30-year-old point guard, like you mentioned, and he's a major defensive liability. So I still do believe that Kemba is a starter in this league, but I think his days as a starter are numbered. And I think at some point in time, I don't think it's going to be this offseason, but I think sooner rather than later, I think Kemba is going to have to really start considering coming off the bench, just because I don't think teams want to pay this much for a guy who's really one-dimensional and is not the number one guy on the team. I mean, on most teams, Kemba is probably going to be at most the two, like the second best player of the team. But on most teams, he's probably going to be the third. So, if you look across the league, could the Lakers go after him just because they're probably looking to part ways with Dennis Schroeder after his abysmal playoff performance in the first round against the Suns? Could the Knicks go after him? I mean, maybe they could, simply just because they kind of had some issues at the point guard position. They were kind of flipping back and forth between Derrick Rose and Elfrid Payton. I don't really know. The Knicks could potentially pursue him. It's just, you have to understand, Kemba's great offensively, but you're going to have to cover for him on the defensive side. And I think Boston did pretty much as best as they could to limit the defensive exposure that he brings to a team. But I think Kemba's spots of going to another team are going to be pretty limited. And with the contract hit that the team's going to have to take, I don't know if the market's going to be freaking on fire for Kemba Walker. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, again, with him being my favorite player to watch a lot of games whenever I can when he's healthy, it does hurt to see that he is kind of hitting that point in his career where it's injuries, and then when he is on the court, he's not doing phenomenal. But I do have his stats up here for the last 2 seasons. They're not as bad as I thought. In his first year in Boston, he averaged 20 points per game. It's not bad. I mean, granted, it's not anywhere what he used to be in the 2 years prior of him going with 25 and then 22 and then 23 the year prior to that. Kemba kind of got better as his career progressed. But again, people don't understand that's because of the inflation of him being the actual literal fucking only option in Charlotte, whether he was a Bobcat or a Hornet. He didn't have to worry about passing. He didn't have to worry about giving it up to someone else in a clutch moment. Kemba took all the shots, and rightfully so, because he was Kemba Walker. He was the best player on the team. But when you came to Boston, which is what didn't make sense, again, he wanted to come to a winning culture. But when you have 3 additional mouths to feed without including yourself, where do you see yourself kind of dominating or, matching up well against somebody? Because you had Jason Tatum in his first year, Jaylen Brown, and Gordon Hayward. Where was Kemba going to go? Where in that trio did Kemba think he was going to dominate? Pick and roll, maybe. Fast break, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Like a switch, maybe. A mismatch of some sort. But he can't go one-on-one with every player. He can't dominate like Jason Tatum can. He can't hit shots like Jason can. He can't play defense and score efficiently like Jaylen can. He doesn't have the offensive skill set that Gordon Hayward does with his height and his vertical. So you're sitting here and you look at it and you're like, well, he did fill that IT void. Isaiah Thomas did it and Isaiah Thomas dominated. Yeah, but IT didn't have all of those mouths to feed at the time. You know what I'm saying? Yep. IT was the guy. Granted, he had Marcus Smart, he had Al Horford and
Kelly
those boys. So he had bigs around him and solid role players. But
I think even Drake Crowder was on that team at one point.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? They had good role players, but in this case, like you had mentioned, Kemba is pretty much the third option at this point. He only played 43 games out of 72. I think he played maybe 1 or 2 postseason games in this series against the Nets, and I just don't think it's going to work out. I never thought it was going to work out in Boston, especially when he chose Boston over the Mavericks. And then obviously looking back at it, I don't think he would have worked in Dallas either because Luka is a dominant, ball dominant player, and we'll get into Luka in a second. But I agree with Kyle. It's really hard to kind of sit here and look and figure out where he's going to go unless it's maybe a bench role or if he's willing to restructure his contract, because nobody wants to pay upwards of $31 million a year for someone who's basically a guaranteed bucket on the other end, and you don't even know if he's going to play half the year, especially with the knee injuries he's been having consistently over the last 2 seasons.
I think, like I mentioned, I think the 2 teams that are probably going to look at him just off the top of my head are going to be the Lakers and the Knicks, just because I think both of those teams are looking for an upgrade at the point guard position. Now, Kemba would be an upgrade over what those teams have currently, just because with the Knicks, I don't know if Derrick Rose is really what I would consider a starting point guard anymore. They're going
to re-sign him.
As much as I would love Derrick Rose to be what he was back in the day, that's just simply not the case. He has flash moments, but it's not consistent. And with Dennis Schroeder in LA, no. Listen, I'm a Lakers fan. I'm saying stay away from Dennis Schroeder pretty much at all costs.
It didn't pan through.
No,
when Dennis was playing
out.
Lights out in the regular season, he's a good defender, and when he had his good offensive streaks, there wasn't a problem,
But in the playoffs, he was non-existent. So,
agreed. We'll get to him and those boys in a minute. But to close out on the Kemba Walker thing, there are teams that are interested, I would assume, just because he has the potential to maybe, with a full offseason, get back to what he was in terms of health. But I mean, we'll just have to see what happens. If he goes to New York, it would be a homecoming. Obviously, him being from the Bronx, I don't know if New York's willing to cough up that much money when they have to re-sign a lot of players. There was speculation that Boston was going to be everything good?
Yeah, you good. I was just looking up at my phone.
Oh, you scared the crap out of me, bro. I was like, gunshots? What the hell's going on?
No, not tonight.
So I'm just looking at it, and I was saying with Portland being a potential trade destination for Kemba, maybe a sign and trade or maybe a player for player kind of swap. I don't think it would happen, but they did report. There were reports when Portland lost that Boston would be one of the front line candidates to try to acquire Damian Lillard. And obviously, if Kemba doesn't want to be there, it would only make sense to swap the guards and maybe pick swap and some other assets. So, just another thing. I don't know if that would work out, but it's just something to keep your mind on.
Maybe. And I know we're going to talk about the Knicks and their offseason plans in a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit about Damian Lillard and the Knicks in a little bit. I'll just leave it at that.
100%. So next subject, a tough one. Well, not really a tough one, but I mean, kind of a difficult situation, so to speak, because, oh, great. Here come the Twins. Another home run from the Twins. in this coming offseason, Luka Doncic is entering his final year of his rookie contract. So obviously, we all know at this point in time in a lot of these young players' career, they typically tend to have the option of either opting in to their final year of their rookie deal and waiting to become a free agent where they could maybe acquire more money, or they take a supermax extension and they re-sign for a longer period of time on top of their already existing rookie contract. So Luka Doncic is eligible for anywhere over $250 million in his supermax extension with the Mavericks. If I remember correctly, I'm sure Mark Cuban has already stated, I would rather divorce my wife than let Luka Doncic leave the city of Dallas. And in his exit interview with the Mavericks, when we were packing up the locker room and they asked him about his potential summer of decision making, I guess. What is your likelihood of signing your supermax contract? What do you think about that? And I believe, to paraphrase, his response was, I think you know the answer to that. In my opinion, Luka's going to stay. Luka's going to sign that contract. If I'm Mark Cuban, I don't even go into the room. I walk in and I give him a blank check. And then I say, my signature's here, whatever you want. Like, there's no way we let him walk. My issue is what we're going to do with the supporting cast around him. Obviously, with all of the issues circulating and rumors about KP's problem with the coaching staff and KP's lack of productivity in the postseason. Obviously, JJ Redick's going to be a free agent. Melly's going to be a free agent. Josh Richardson's in the last year of his deal. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a free agent, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So our roster is pretty much going to have to be completely restructured because there were a lot of people on 1 or 2 year deals that we're going to have to look at. Obviously, Luka's going to take the bulk of our cap space because Kristaps Porzingis is already eating $153 million. Highway robbery. We were robbed. I swear. Mark Cuban signed that on, like he was bamboozled into it. I don't know if he was, threatened at gunpoint. I'm just kidding. Obviously, everybody. I'm just saying Kristaps has just been that bad for us in the last couple of weeks. So, Kyle, obviously, you're not the Mavericks fan here, but in regards to Luka's extension, we all know he's going to sign it. What do you think Dallas has to do in order to get through not only this first round, but to make an actual run into the postseason going forward through Luka's career?
Well, once they finish this supermax deal with Luka, because it almost kind of seems like symbolic at this point. They're going to get that done. It's not a matter of if, it's just when. I think the main thing here is they're going to have to get a big man. They got to get somebody who is actually dominant down low. It's simply just because, look, they've got a decent amount of 7-footers, and yet they don't really rebound that well. Like Kristaps, every now and then, he can get you maybe 10 boards. Maybe Boban can get you 10 boards, but they're just too inconsistent. They need somebody like, I'm just saying, not go out and go get this guy. I'm just saying they need somebody like DeAndre Ayton, who is great down low and works the paint from 10 to 15 feet out, and is just eating the rebounds from the opposing team's shots if they miss them. Because I think the one thing that kind of stood out for me in this series against the is the offense is not a problem outside of, Luka's going to be able to score 30 to 40 points in the playoffs consistently. It's the defense. The defense gave up a lot of points in that Clippers series. And I think if you're able to kind of improve the overall defense of the team, I think you can win a lot of playoff games that way. Because I do think that the Dallas Mavericks are going to be a very good team, and they're going to be consistently in the playoffs. And outside of the defense, I think they got to get another shooter that's consistent. Because when I look down this roster, Dorian Finney-Smith, he has his moments, but is he realistically the second guy next to Luka? No, he shouldn't be. At most, Dorian Finney-Smith should be somewhere around maybe the third or fourth best player on the team. Tim Hardaway Jr., kind of the same thing. He's just not consistent enough. There's nobody on this roster that I look at and say, wow, he is just as consistent as Luka Doncic. Granted, not like these role players are going to score the way that Luka has. But I'm just saying, consistently dropping 15, 20 points or grabbing, 5 to 10 rebounds a game and getting about 5 or 6 assists. There's nobody on this roster outside of Luka that can do that. So I think it behooves the Mavericks to look for a legitimate number 2 player to go along with Luka. That should be their goal this offseason. And to me, I think they got to get rid of Porzingis just because there's too much complaining with him. I know there's frustration about he's basically kind of like Luka's sideshow, but Kristaps, he's getting paid all that money, and he was basically a no-show in more than half of the games against the Clippers. So
way more than half. He only had double digits, I think, twice out of 7 games.
I was being nice, but that's kind of the 2 points that I guess I could make. They got to get a legitimate center who could just eat down low all day and get a legitimate shooter. Basically, get Luka his Robin. That's how I see it.
Yeah. I can elaborate 10 times more into this being a Mavs fan and, knowing the ins and outs of the beat writers and the reporters and the narratives that I continue to read day in and day out. But for the sake of the podcast, this was about Luka. I only asked about the potential of him having a supporting cast because it seems like this supermax deal is going to be, like Kyle said, not if, but when.
Yeah.
So,
but this roster, as currently constructed, nah.
It ain't gonna do it. Exactly. I believe the same thing. There's a lot of people we got to let go, or if they do resign, maybe like a 1-year deal just to prove it. Transitioning into said next subject, Kyle, what was the next one after Luka? I forget.
Talk about Braun for a little bit.
Right, Kyle, take this one away, bro, because I know this one rubbed you the wrong way.
Yeah. So don't worry, you're gonna get the question first. We're gonna talk a little bit about LeBron James here. So if you guys have just been kind of paying attention to LeBron after this playoff series between the Lakers and the Suns came to its conclusion, it seems like he was very focused on the upcoming movie Space Jam 2, where he is the main headline of the movie. And
never been remade in the first place.
I've seen a lot of these quotes and I've seen a lot of posts from LeBron about this upcoming movie. I don't know how good it's going to be, but he definitely seems excited about it. So with that said, and Kevin, I'm going to pose this question to you. Do you have a problem with James appearing to look more interested in Space Jam 2 than he did with how the Lakers performed against the Suns in their playoff series?
Yes. That's the only way I could put it. Like, absolutely. So again, not to continue to make the comparison, but when you really look at people's overall careers, when you make the comparison, because LeBron James is in that upper echelon of one of the greatest players to ever play this this game called basketball, sorry. And I automatically make the comparison to Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. This man literally is more hyped about a movie than his team looking like dog water in the first round of the playoffs. We're not talking about the Hornets. We're not talking about the freaking Cavaliers. We're talking about one of the most entrusted and biggest and most, like, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I'm going blank. Storied franchises in the NBA, in the Los Angeles Lakers. And you didn't just go out and lose. There were games where you got mollywopped. Yes, Anthony Davis was out. That doesn't mean you check out and say, well, it's a wrap. Time to focus on Hollywood. Like, dude, the narrative of you going to LA for Hollywood dreams or future aspirations and acting and whatnot just continue to look like more of the truth. Yes, they won a championship last year in the NBA bubble. I'm not discrediting that he didn't do what he said he was going to do. He brought a championship back to the Los Angeles Lakers, which is great. But we're already moved on to the next season. We're here. I'm tired of looking backwards. We need to continue to look at the fact that he just loses interest very quickly. And that showed in game 5. The Lakers were losing by a shit ton. He walked out 5 minutes, 6 minutes left in the game. He didn't seem interested enough in game 6 after his teammates were making very bad decisions. They went on a run. Once that run ended, he just looked like he gave up. He just stopped caring. Again, the lead went from, I think, 24-25. They cut it to about 13 or 10 points. And then LeBron came out for like a split second, or somebody turned the ball over. Again, my memory is fading because I'm getting old, basically, is what I'm trying to say, guys. and Braun just kind of like just mentally checked out. And the second that this series ends, he's literally all about Space Jam, Space Jam, Space Jam. Like, I get it. You can't worry about something that already happened. You can't stress on the outcome that has already been decided. And he's not going to wallow about the Lakers losing. He's not going to sit there and complain and bitch about it. But the fact that the amount of effort you're putting into advertising for this movie versus you trying to petition your team or push your team to win, it just doesn't seem to be working for me. It seems like he's literally, like I continue to say, he checked out and he just wanted to advertise and promote for this Space Jam movie. Again, I don't think that movie should have been recreated anyway, but that's neither here nor there. So, I mean, you're the Laker fan. You're the objective one. I'm sitting here and I'm wondering what the hell's on your mind because you wouldn't tell me prior to the episode. So, tee off, my boy. What the hell's going on here?
Well, here's the thing. I think once AD went out of Game 6 with that groin injury that he was dealing with, I think at that point he was done. And honestly, you can make a case that he was probably done even in Game 5 because he left with about 5.5 minutes in the game to go back to the locker room. For what reason, I don't know. But still, just optically speaking, it doesn't look good when you leave your teammates to go back to the locker room with 5.5 minutes to go. Granted, I don't know the context of why he went back, but still, optically, it doesn't look good. And then immediately after Game 6, the series is over, the Suns are advancing, and I understand that the Lakers season is over. To move on to the topic of starting to promote the movie that you're going to be starring in, that's going to come out this summer, that's a little bit self-centered in my opinion. And I think it really is reflective of just his general tone or his general thought process to this season is pretty much over. It was pretty much over just because of the inconsistencies of LeBron and Anthony Davis being out of the lineup too much due to injury. So I think he thought that this season was a lost cause. Granted, I'm basically trying to guess what he was thinking, but that's what I saw. That's what his behavior was reflective of. And look, he's going into the last year of his contract. And I think at this point, look, I think we'll see what happens during this offseason, but we're going to find out very quickly if he's going to be interested in basketball this season when the season starts in November or December, whenever it starts. Because I'll be honest with you, it was kind of a dick move what he did by leaving that game early. That's just my opinion. And I don't really care like the reasons behind it. I'm just saying optically it does not look good to do that. And then to be just so kind of standoffish about talking about the playoff series with the Suns after it ended, to talk about a freaking movie that's probably going to be a bust anyway. I think this movie is going to be not that good anyway.
Gosh.
That's just my opinion. Yeah, I think LeBron's got his priorities set on just kind of focusing on that next aspect of his career. I'm not talking about his basketball career. I think he's going to get big into a multimedia production company. I think that's where he's going to go next after his NBA career is over, just because he's already started his own show on HBO with The Shot, and he seems to have gotten some decent traction with that in the first couple seasons that they've had. And I think that's just where his mind is going to eventually wander to as his NBA career comes to an end. Now, I will say this about LeBron. Look, the Lakers and the Heat last year were the last two teams in the bubble, and they had about 2.5 months off of rest before going into this season. Do I think that they possibly ran into a wall at the end just because they looked exhausted? Maybe, because Miami looked absolutely gassed against the Bucks in their first playoff series. So there may be some truth to that, but before AD got hurt and LeBron got hurt, this team was rolling on all cylinders, and it all fell apart when those two guys got hurt. So I think just in LeBron's head, I think he thought that the season was essentially over with, just because he knew he wasn't going to be 100%, and he knew AD wasn't going to be 100%. So that's how I kind of look at it. But I think it's a little bit unsettling to be so focused on this movie that he's starring in, and to be quite honest with you, LeBron did not look that great in these playoff series in this playoff series against the Suns. He was average. And I think it's actually time to start saying this. I think his reign as the best player in the NBA is officially over. I think he's still going to have.
It's coming to an end. I wouldn't say it's officially over.
I'm fine with saying that, simply because I think this newer generation of NBA players is starting to make their impact. I think Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, even though that they're just a couple years younger than him, I just think that they're in better overall shape than LeBron is. And I just don't think that Bron is capable of carrying this team to a finals appearance anymore. I just think when I look across the Western Conference now, I don't think he's going to be able to do it. There's too many good teams. Phoenix is on the rise. And Phoenix is on a meteoric rise. Denver is looking good, and they're looking good without Jamal Murray in the lineup, because they got Nikola Jokic, who's the MVP. Utah's on the rise because they got Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert doing their thing. And you got Jordan Clarkson, who's the sixth man of the year off the bench. And they still got to deal with the Clippers. I mean, that's 4 good teams right there. And then Golden State gets Klay Thompson back. And you got Steph and Klay Thompson running the show in San Francisco. And the Lakers have LeBron James, who is going to be 37 in December, and Anthony Davis, who has been riddled with injuries throughout his entire career. So I just don't see it for the Lakers anymore. And I don't think LeBron can do it anymore. I think the last we saw of LeBron being able to carry a team was last year when they won the finals in the bubble. But he got help from Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis can't stay healthy, I don't think LeBron really has the willpower or he's going to bestow the effort to carry that team to the finals like he did in multiple ways that he did with the Cavaliers in his second stint in Cleveland. I'm going to just flat out say it. I just don't think LeBron's the best player in the world anymore. I think it's either Kevin Durant or Steph Curry. That's who I would rather pick at this point than LeBron. It's just I can't trust LeBron anymore to carry a team to the finals anymore, unless he's getting help.
Well, it is a bold statement. I do respect you for coming out here and saying it with such confidence. So I mean,
I'm just looking at this from the Western Conference. Just like,
yeah, no, I feel
there's 5 good teams. They're all on the rise. And if the Lakers aren't able to do anything in the offseason to attract some top flight free agents to build a better roster around LeBron, you think the Lakers are going to be able to compete and go toe to toe with some of these teams like the Phoenix Suns? The Phoenix Suns waxed them. Granted, I know AD was hurt, and I know that had he stayed healthy, it could have been a different series. But that game 5 left a bitter taste in my mouth when they got smacked by like 30 points. And LeBron had essentially given up within the first half of that game. So I think LeBron could still have great runs and stretches. It's just that I think that meteoric pace that he was at for so long is over. He's still going to be a very great player. I'm not going to discount that. But as the best player in the league, that's over. I have no problem saying that.
Well, to each his own. We'll see what happens next season. You know, he comes back healthy. AD comes back healthy. We see what they do in the offseason when they reload. Who knows if they try to go after Damian Lillard somehow. I don't think they have anywhere near the assets required to go out and get someone of his caliber. But you never know. So, I mean, we will see what happens. Like I said.
We got to mark this date. This is what, June 9th?
Yeah.
I might be 100% wrong. Listen, LeBron could do a freaking 180, pull a Tom Brady, and win 2 out of the 3 next finals that are up on the board. I might be 100% wrong on this one, but the way that I'm basing this off of is just general momentum. And I just think the momentum right now, I think that pendulum is going against LeBron. And ever since LeBron went out to the Western Conference, things have not been easy for him. He is not dominating the Western Conference like he did at the Eastern Conference. Granted, he's older, so I will give him that. It's just that I think now he realizes how difficult it is to win in the West.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's going to be a continuous struggle, like you said, with the rise of a lot of these younger teams. So only time will tell.
Yeah.
But since we are talking about those younger teams, I believe the next segment is supposed to be the New York Knickerbockers.
Yep. So it's the last segment that we have.
Pending their pending free agency acquisitions. Dude, the Knicks for the last, what is it, 5-7 years have just been every single offseason, every single summer. The Knicks have the opportunity to sign so-and-so. The Knicks are clearing up cap space to attract so-and-so. The Knicks are trying to acquire so-and-so in a sign and trade and then go after one more talent free agent. And last year was the prime fucking suspect of, Kyrie and KD coming to New York. Kyrie and KD are coming to the Garden. And what happened? They crossed the bridge and they went out there to Brooklyn. Every year they seem to go through the same thing. I've literally had enough because it's like they always say they have a shot, or they're looking to acquire this person, or they're looking to have contacts with this team to maybe trade for a star player. And the rumors have already started. So just to clarify, the Knicks have not only reportedly, all of this could be bogus, all of this could be nonsense, it could not be official. This is just things that Kyle and I have seen throughout the internet and throughout the days since the Knicks were booted out of the playoffs by Atlanta last week. So there are speculations that the Knicks are going to be in talks with Portland to try to see if they can acquire Damian Lillard. There are talks that the Knicks could possibly be interested in trying to acquire John Wall if the price is right for Houston. And the latest news, I think I saw it this morning, that the Knicks could potentially be interested in bringing in veteran guard Dennis Schroeder and veteran forward Kelly Oubre to the already young and up-and-coming roster that is the Knicks. So, Kyle, with those four names right then and there, I'm just going to ask you bluntly, are any of them possible other than – okay, excuse me, let me rephrase. Because two of them are possible because they're affordable, because they did not have good seasons. But the other two names – do you see the Knicks going out there and really trying to throw the kitchen sink, the laundry machine, and then the fucking boiler to go out and get Damian Lillard, or to even give the Houston Rockets a dishwasher for a 30-year-old John Wall?
Not really. See, here's the thing. I'm of the mindset that the Knicks have a great young core. Now, what comes along with that is growing pains. And we saw that in the playoffs this year, simply because in the regular season, the Knicks were the fourth seed. They played outstanding throughout the regular season. But the playoff inexperience proved to be too much, and we saw some inconsistent play from Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and then some of the other players that are on the Knicks roster. Yeah. Maybe Reggie Bullock. Start saying Reggie Bullock's name and say, oh.
No, you said his name, and you ain't say it.
Oh, I didn't say Mike King? Mike King? Kevin, you got to provide the context on this one.
Guys, if you're on TikTok, there's this group. There's this two guys. They're called the Broadway
Brothers.
I forget the Broadway Brothers, and they always just go over all of these draft classes and the lavish lifestyle of Rob Dyrdek or whatever. Long story short, he was going over the draft that Julius Randle was a part of, and to introduce him, he was like, number 7 draft pick overall, Julius Randle, my king. And because he's a Knicks fan because they're from New York, and he obviously proceeds to name the rest of the draft. And the reason why I exclaimed who is because every time there's a player that didn't pan out in the league or that no one's ever fucking heard of, there's no explanation. He just goes 5th overall pick, Dante Exum. Who? And it continues to just basically either tear the draft apart or obviously go over the career accolades of the players in that draft class. But I just thought it was funny because prior to the episode, Kyle literally said, bro, if you say Julius Randle's name or if his name comes up in a conversation, I'm just going to whisper to the camera, my king.
Talk about Dennis. Good to talk about Dennis Schroeder. Talking about he had averaged 3-4 points in the playoffs. You got to start saying who when we talk about Dennis Schroeder because
he did have 24 in one game.
I don't give up. I don't care. I don't care. Simply because he's a scrub. Regular season he's fine, but in the playoffs he was like playoff P. Didn't show up.
Back to the segment of the Knicks and Damian Lillard and John Wall. Do you think that the Knicks don't go after?
No. I mean, they'll try. They're not going to get him. Just because if Damian Lillard is available, the whole entire league is going to be trying to go get him.
100%.
But I think the Knicks should just stay with the core of guys that they have. And the reason why I say that is because I think that there's this idea amongst NBA GMs that if these young players don't develop to the way that they want them to within the first 2 to 3 years of starting with the team, they are already looking to move them because they're not playing up to expectations. Imagine if the Lakers had gotten rid of Kobe Bryant or traded Kobe after his bad playoff performance where he was chucking up air balls in the first playoff series that he played in. I'm just saying, you have to allow these guys to develop. Julius Randle won Most Improved Player of the Year. RJ Barrett is still coming into his own. And you have some good veteran leadership with Taj Gibson and Derrick Rose. Granted, I know Taj Gibson isn't what I would consider like the best player in the league, but he provides a solid veteran presence on the team. And so does Derrick Rose. I think that those assets on the team are invaluable, especially to some young guys like Julius Randle and RJ Barrett. I say keep those guys there. If you want to listen to the offers of trying to get Damian Lillard or maybe look towards Kawhi if Kawhi becomes available, depending on how his situation goes with the Clippers, you can entertain, at least hear the possible offers that either the Clippers or the Trailblazers want in return. But outside of that, I say stick with the guys that they have and continue to build their confidence. And if they do that, they'll be fine. I really do think if they keep this core together, that the Knicks could potentially end up in a situation where they could play in an Eastern Conference Finals, just because I do think that they have that potential. You have to let these guys keep playing at the level that they're playing at and let them continue to gradually improve their skills as time progresses. I truly believe, and this is like the optimist in me, I truly believe that the Knicks could one day be a top 2, top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. They're already top 4 after this season. Granted, could this one season be a fluke and they kind of return to their old ways? Yeah, maybe. I'm not going to rule that out. But when I look across the league, when I look at what the Lakers had with Jordan Clarkson, Julius Randle, who else? Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, all those guys are now playing either above average or stellar play of basketball. Brandon Ingram has been improving every single year that he's played with the Pelicans. Lonzo Ball has changed his jump shot and is what I would consider an average to an above average point guard. And then when you look at Julius Randle, he's been outstanding for the Knicks ever since the Knicks acquired him, I believe 2 seasons ago. And now you're looking at Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson's the 6th man of the year for Utah. He's damn near averaging starter numbers. So I think if the Knicks are smart here, they look at the model that the Lakers have with their young guys, except they keep them. Let those guys develop. And I think that this could potentially be a competent franchise for the next couple of years. I don't think that they should just hit the eject button and try to send everybody that they have from their young core to go get Damian Lillard for maybe 1 to 2 years, maybe 3 at the most, of trying to get a championship with Damian Lillard. Don't get me wrong. Dame is great. If they try to go for Kawhi, if Kawhi's available, fine. But at the expense of these young guys, the potential that they could bring for the next decade, I say they should just stick with the core that they have. Try to get some mid-level free agents, something that's realistic, not a pipe dream like, oh, we're going to go get 2 top-flight free agents. That's not going to happen. Look for some guys that you can build around to bolster the roster, and I think they'll be fine. I think they got a winning formula here.
Here's the issue. I just looked up the Knicks roster for 2022 on contract. This is bad. I didn't realize they literally lost everyone. The only active players on this roster that aren't like rookies or like 10-day contracts, like G League players, is Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Kevin Knox, who will probably get let go because he has sucked since he's come out of Kentucky, and then Mitchell Robertson, who has been hurt for the last couple of years for the Knicks. So you literally have a total of 6 players that have seen the court, because the other 2 players on this list are Luka Vildoza and Norvel Pelly. I've never seen them touch the court. Maybe they come in garbage time. Maybe they don't. I don't know. I don't care. But there goes Taj. There goes D Rose. There goes Reggie. There goes Norlands Noel. I mean, that's 4 vets right there that played really good minutes for this Knicks team. Granted, we don't know the situation and what they're going to do in the offseason, but I would assume you're going to go out there and you're going to give, money to the players that rightfully deserve it. AKA, I think Derrick Rose gets an extension. I think really Reggie Bullock maybe comes back on a 1-year deal. But here's the thing. Here's why I will disagree with you to a certain extent. I believe that they have the capability to go after these free agents or available players depending on what they do in free agency. And I only say that because I hate to sound like a prick. New York is New York. You want top money. You want to play in the greatest city in the world. Now that fans are coming back into the stadium next season, I would assume everybody's back at 100% capacity, no restrictions, because we pretty much are getting there during this postseason. I think they have the potential to go maybe after the John Wall, the risk. Not that I'm saying it's going to happen. Not that I'm saying I would like for it to happen, but that takes care of the point guard situation in terms of the starter. He had a great year this year. He stood relatively healthy. I'm not saying they do it. I'm just saying I think they have the opportunity to go after a player like that because this is the first winning season they've had in 8 years. New York is rocking again. Obviously, the city was behind this team 100%. With a young, inexperienced team, excluding a few veterans, they were the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're coming off of a Coach of the Year season in Tom Thibodeau. They have attractive pieces on all aspects of the fucking game. They have cap space, they have up-and-coming young stars, and they have a great coaching staff. So I really think, and obviously, again, it's New York City. They have the potential to acquire somebody. They probably go out and do it because the Knicks can't help themselves. If someone's available, it's like bringing a kid to a candy store and asking them not to grab a candy bar. It's just they just can't do it. They're going to have a lot of money this next offseason, pending if they give people extensions and whatnot. But I'm curious to see what they do this season. I don't think they go after Dame. They literally don't have any pieces here that Portland's going to want to take away from them. And I don't think that they're going to go after Dennis Schroeder and Kelly Oubre because those are just negative signings. Maybe Dennis, because Dennis has the potential to play at an offensive clip, and he does play solid defense. He won't have to be as an important role as he would have been on the Lakers, because once AD went out, he pretty much was the second option, if we're being completely honest, and he just kind of flopped at that point. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But the Knicks have a shot here this offseason. Good culture, good environment, cap space, and they have good players. So who's to say they don't go after, like you said, maybe a middle to high, like maybe like a B plus kind of free agent superstar, like a Kyle Lowry, like a veteran point guard. You know what I'm saying? Something around that aspect. Maybe a DeMar DeRozan. Who knows?
This pipe dream of them trying to get Dame, that
needs to stop. I just read you their roster. There's nothing here unless you give them Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, RJ Barrett, and future first-round picks, and maybe throw in Tom Thibodeau because they don't have a head coach right now.
You think that Houston's going to just willingly give up John Wall like that?
No, but I mean, his contract is eating up a lot, and they're in full rebuild mode. There's no reason to eat up that much money. So I think that he definitely moves this offseason.
What, for somebody that can't stay healthy?
I
I
didn't say
mean,
it was going to happen with the Knicks.
I'm just the way that I look at it, I would just kind of just focus on building around the pieces that they have. This is a good core. They're young, but keep them together. I really do think if that they keep this team together and add some mid-level free agents, so they're not essentially breaking the bank to go get a top flight, top 5 player in the league, whether it's in free agency or a trade. But I just don't think that it's worth it for the Knicks. The Knicks have a winning team without a superstar.
They don't though. They're all of those players are free agents. The impactful players are gone.
I mean, they still got.
I just read they only have 4 players that actually play important minutes on this team left.
More than likely, what's going to happen is that just because of the relationship that Tom Thibodeau have and Derrick Rose, I think Derrick Rose gets re-signed by the Knicks. That's just my opinion. I could be 100% wrong, but that's just my guess. Taj Gibson, he's a role player. He's largely a defensive presence, but they can replace that in free agency. This is where I'm talking about, okay, this is where you kind of look for the mid-level type free agents. I'm not talking about somebody that you're going to put in your you're going to put in your starting 5. I'm talking about the roster from 6 to 10. That top 5, as far as the starters go, seems pretty decent. They may have to add a point guard because, look, Elfrid Payton did not work out this season, so they may look to upgrade that position as well. But I don't think that if they just go out and pursue Dame and they're saying, okay, all of these guys are on the table to go get Dame, I think it's going to leave just a nightmare scenario for the Knicks because these guys are going to have the thought process. I'm like, well, why am I going to play for a franchise that is actively trying to shop me? And, I understand that it's a business, but it's like, it's going to have an impact on these guys' ability to perform if they're under the constant possibility of I could be traded just because that the Knicks are going to go after Damian Lillard or Kawhi Leonard or John Wall. I don't think it's worth it for them. I say stick with the young guys, let these guys develop for a couple of years and see what you make of it. I've always been of the mindset that it is best to build from within and build them up. Look what Golden State was able to accomplish from their own draft classes. I'm not saying that
I agree.
I'm not saying that the Knicks are going to win 3 to 4 titles and they're going to take over the league. But I've always been of the mindset it is better to develop the team from within, build them up over a couple years. That way, that just the chemistry is a lot better that way than picking free agents like left and right, trying to put a puzzle piece together like the Lakers did when LeBron went to LA. I've always been in that mindset.
So I just looked up the free agents in this next upcoming summer, right? This is, guys, I know we're dragging on this a little long, but I mean, the Knicks always find a way to be in this particular echelon of a topic.
I'm not even a Knicks fan, and I want the Knicks to be good. It's just, don't abandon these guys. I
don't think they're going to abandon. So check this out. Excluding Kawhi Leonard, he is the top upper echelon. He's got a player option. There's no guarantee he even leaves LA, right? So I'm just gonna remove him for a second. Okay. Chris Paul is next on this list. This is NBC Sports' top, right? So Phoenix. We'll see what happens. But there's rumors that he's going to opt out and he's going to ask for another $100 million contract. We'll talk about that another day.
Yeah.
DeMar DeRozan is a free agent, 100%. He's 31. He's probably leaving San Antonio. I don't know if that helps RJ Barrett and if he takes over the forward spot in New York. I don't know. He provides veteran leadership, good offensive player, solid defense, and very efficient from the field and the free throw line. So a potential option. He's never going to get another $28, $30 million contract like he did with the Spurs. It's potential.
That's one person. That to me is realistic.
Okay, and then the next 2 players are Kyle Lowry and Mike Conley. I didn't even know Mike Conley was available. Mike Conley is a great, stable, and efficient point guard when healthy. He had a very big resurgent year this year. He helped Utah become the best team in the Western Conference and the best team in the league record-wise. And obviously, Kyle Lowry, veteran guard. Everybody knows, very efficient scorer when healthy as well. Good ball handler, clock management. He's coming off of a $30 million year in terms of his final contract year with the Raptors. But who's to say the Knicks don't sign him for a year or two to see what he can do in terms of at least being able to dominate the ball, bring the ball up and give them an actual true and honest point guard. And I mean, obviously, there's other people. There's Lonzo Ball. He's a restricted free agent. Who knows if the Pelicans re-sign him? So, I mean, whatever people offer him, he could get that matched by the Pelicans. I'm just looking at the guards remaining. And, you have Spencer Dinwiddie, excuse me. You have Norman Powell, had a great year this year. You know what I'm saying? Evan Fournier had a bad stint in Boston in the remainder of the second half of the year, but who's to say he doesn't have, an Orlando Magic year the next time you have Devontae Graham, who's young. And then I'm just looking at, Tim Hardaway Jr., does he come back to New York? And then Gary Trent Jr. There's a lot of, like I said, B to B plus level free agents here that won't break the bank, but are veterans. And then you have Victor Oladipo. I'm not saying he goes or leaves Miami, but I mean, the guy got traded like 2 times this season and barely played at all.
I understand the temptation to go after a top flight free agent. I get that. But I'm telling you right now, I would be thrilled, not as a Knicks fan, to see someone like Mike Conley Jr. or DeMar DeRozan be on the Knicks, simply because it's like I mentioned earlier with that veteran leadership. You can't put a price on that. That's invaluable. Granted, that's something that we don't see. We see it on the court, but it's like the day-to-day interactions that they have with the players in practice, the off-the-court conversations that they have one-on-one outside of just the team facilities. Like, you can't put a value on that because that stuff is priceless. Like, Damian Lillard would be great on the Knicks. I'm not discounting that. But at what cost is it going to be to go get him? I'm just saying it's more realistic and probably a better option to go after somebody like Mike Conley Jr., DeMar DeRozan, maybe Gary Trent Jr., just because you don't have to break the bank, like you said. And I think it's within their best interest to keep the young core together and make the most of it. I don't think this is like something you have to blow the whole team up because you got bounced out in the first round of the playoffs. All these young guys have to go through some sort of adversity through their career. And guess what? They may get to the playoffs next year. Guess what? They could get bounced out of the first round again. Jordan had a habit of getting knocked out of the first round of the playoffs. But over time, they finally found ways to become a winning basketball team and then eventually a championship winning team. I'm not saying that's going to happen with the Knicks. I'm just saying you have to kind of go, these young players have to go through the trials and tribulations that go along with becoming a possible NBA champion. And the way that I see it, I just think that there's this rush to blow it up and try to get a top flight player if he's available. Granted, I know they tried that with KD and Kyrie a couple years back, and look how it ended up. They couldn't get him. And now you're in a situation where you have a good core of young guys, and you're going to blow it up to get a couple years of Damian Lillard. I don't think that's going to result in an NBA championship.
It would be repeating what he has in Portland, honestly.
You're going
to blow it up, and he's going to be the only person on that team.
Exactly. So it's like, is it worth it for me? No. Go after some mid-level free agents. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the Knicks can make a run. Obviously, their front office is going to be smarter this offseason. I think that they need to start with, potentially giving Julius an extension, getting Derrick Rose back in the building, and then they can move on from there.
Let me ask you just a quick one. What do you think the Knicks' true potential is with these guys?
I wouldn't go as far as what you said in terms of Eastern Conference Finals, because obviously there are a lot of outlying pieces right now. We have no idea what's going on. This roster scares me right now. Like, to know that there are only 4 players that touch the basketball court remaining on this team is very, very concerning. There are 7 available roster spots on this. This is very bad in terms of seeing how far they can go because they did well with this group. And unless they re-sign everybody, excluding Kevin Knox and kicking Elfrid Payton out to the curb, this team is not going to be the same because they created an identity and they made a run with what they had in that locker room. And we both know in all of sports, if you change that core, that group of guys that made that historic or that one good year run, it could happen like you said a few minutes ago. They could end up flopping and going back to one of the worst teams in the league because now they know, all right, we're gonna keen in on Julius Randle. We're gonna let RJ Barrett shoot, and Mitchell Robertson might play half the year because of his injuries. Who knows? I think they need to make an impactful statement by going out and signing young, impactful players. Like I said, B to B plus. And if they have the cap and the availability to go out and get a bigger one, like a DeMar, like a DeMar, yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. In that mid tier level, Mike Conley Jr., then you do it. But if not, like we've been saying, veterans, re-sign Derrick Rose, maybe bring back Taj Gibson or Nerlens Noel for the defensive purpose that they bring in the veteran leadership as well. And Tom Thibodeau's the core right there. Tom Thibodeau's the guy that brings them all together. Defensive efficiency. We all know the type of players that he likes to bring into the system. So we will see what happens. I did not expect this segment to go as long as it has, but that's what the Knicks tend to do to me. And they just drag out fucking internal segments.
I'm not even a Knicks fan, but there's general excitement about this team. I can't explain it.
Can't shake it. Yeah, there's just something about it. And there's a buzz back in the city, and that's big.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than freaking Lakers, and I'm a Lakers fan. The Lakers aren't going anywhere, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but, guys, we've been talking for a while here. We didn't expect this episode to go as long as it did, so we just want to first and foremost thank you for watching the video if you're here, if you get to this point. If not, follow the channel, subscribe to the channel, like, comment on whatever videos you feel like it. We do appreciate any and all support. We just hit 169 subscribers today. We're one shy of 170. Share it with your friends, share the Spotify, share the link to the Apple podcast, whatever it is that you guys got to do. We're here on pretty much almost every available platform. Kyle and I are going to continue to bring out all and any content that we can. The NBA playoffs are rocking. Great content with free agency looming within a few weeks of the NBA playoffs. We do know that it's going to get interesting and see not only what happens to the Knicks, what happens to the Mavs, what happens to the Lakers, what happens to Damian Lillard, what happens to Kemba Walker. There are a lot of names out here that could be in new uniforms come next season. Obviously, the NFL, Julio Jones being out there officially signing with the Titans, that went through. So NFL news, we're kind of sitting stagnant right now, waiting for, mini camps and, mandatory offseason camps to come and start. Baseball's in full swing, and the NHL playoffs are obviously in full swing as well. Kyle and I are lacking on that front. I know Kyle's probably watched a lot more of it than I have, but, we have topics to discuss. Yeah, I mean, we have topics for you guys coming. We have endless content. We're trying to make sure we get 2 to 3 episodes, 2 to 3 segments, or 2 to 3 days at least of content for you. So please let us know what we can do better. Message us on social media, whatever it is that you guys got to do. But again, from the bottom of our hearts, the Neighborhood Podcast wouldn't be anything without your support. So we just genuinely appreciate you guys being here. And, we got more to come.
Yeah, and I just want to take the time to appreciate and say thank you to the people that are listening to us on Spotify or wherever you guys listen to the podcast. I know it's a little bit different listening to the podcast rather than watching it on YouTube, but we definitely appreciate the support on the audio platforms only. So we definitely appreciate that. And it's like Kevin said, we still got a lot of NBA content to go through. We're in literally the heart of the playoffs right now in the NBA, and this is what it's all about. Don't be surprised if I talk a little bit about hockey in some future segments, just because we are kind of getting towards the better part of the NHL playoffs. We're starting to get closer to the final 4 teams. So this will definitely be fun to watch as we get closer to the Stanley Cup Finals. And it's pretty much it. That's all I got. It's going to be a fun stretch for the next couple of weeks. So definitely stay tuned for what we got planned for you guys. It's going to be fun. But with that said, you guys, wrap it up from here. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. And we will see you guys either in another episode next week or some future videos that come out for some segments later in the week.